Dirty Moderates, you all know where I stand, or try to stand on the spectrum, being a proud politically homeless guy these days. But as you know, the podcast I created was created for an exchange of ideas as an antidote to hyperbolic cable news networks and stupid binaries, which have come to define our politics, I think, in a really bad way, in a bad faith way. So I always try to have a good faith conversation. We don't always have to agree. It's not what democracy is about. We're allowed to disagree. We're in an era where if you disagree with people, they're your enemy. That's a terrible way to think. We have to think about things. We got to come together where we can and disagree where we can. And I think that's the best of America. And I think we've lost so much of that, especially in the last decade or so. But my guest today, I'm really excited about because he comes to us by way of the Heritage Foundation, often bandied about in the liberal media as the great villains of our time. And that gets maligned, I think, sometimes unfairly, sometimes fairly. But my guest, I think, speaks for himself, and his fabulous new book, by the way, his name is Mike Gonzalez. He is the Angeles T. Arredondo e Pluribus Unum Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. His latest book is NextGen Marxism, What It Is and How to Combat It. He wrote it with Catherine Cornell Gorka. But Mike, welcome to Dirty Moderate.
Adam, that was very well done. You pronounced my name. You pronounced my title very, very well, better than anybody ever has. And I'm thrilled to be here. I've listened to you.
Thank you.
I like the style that you do your shows in. So that's the reason I'm here.
Well, as we talked about before the show, all my years in Miami, learning Spanish at 8 years old onward, being active with the South American, of course, the Cuban American community, I better get my Spanish right? Yeah. If I don't, I'm a real failure. Anyway, welcome to the show. So I wanted to start first with you, Mike, because I want one of the things I also like to do is let's demystify and get out of these horrible labels we get stuck in. Tell us about yourself. Tell us who Mike Gonzalez is, how you came to be, and then subsequently how your views came to shape who you are, and vice versa.
Wow, that's such a hard question to answer, because we're so geared in America today to think of ourselves in just these boxes, ethnic or any kind of identity. Yeah. And I'm a multitude of things, right? Like everyone else is like you're a multitude of things. I'm a Roman Catholic. Yeah. I'm a father. I'm a husband.
Right.
I'm an American. I'm conservative. These things matter a great deal to me. I'm a Cuban American. I'm also, because I lived in Spain as a kid, and my grandparents were Spanish. I very much like northern Spain, where they came from, and I go there very often, and I have land there. I have inherited land there.
Whereabouts? Where in Spain?
In Galicia, where my grandmother was from. Nice. And my grandfather was from Asturias. That's my mother's side. Then my father's side is different.
Right.
But I'm a compendium of all these things. Another important thing is I'm a former journalist.
Yeah.
I write books, and you're a journalist in some sense. Unfortunately, once you're a journalist, there's some part of you remains a journalist. So I was a journalist for almost 20 years. Ended up with the Wall Street Journal, and then my last job was in Hong Kong, where I was editor of the editorial page there of the Asian Journal. And then I joined the Bush administration. So I'm all these things, Adam. It's difficult to depends on what day and in what element. I guess American. I'm an American. I'm a real a believer in this country. If you want one identifier, that would be it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very patriotic. I think if you read my press materials, they call me a patriotic provocateur because I do believe in America, and I've seen the erosion of faith that, and I don't mean religious faith because I'm not particularly religious. I mean in national faith in our ability to become Americans. Like you said, it's hard because you seldom get asked, these questions of what box you're in, and you don't have to be in a box. Like I don't have to be in a box. You saying you're an American first is what I say. I don't say I'm a Jewish American, I'm a this American, I'm an American first. And that idea, that animating idea, which is really so foundational to the country's DNA, is what makes us exceptional. Okay. Because if you think about it, no other country in the world does it that way. You go somewhere and you go to England or you go to Turkey, you're still that ethnic group. Here, though it's been eroded, being an American has been the defining trait. That's the identity, a commitment to a country not founded on hereditary or aristocracy, a country founded on the rule of law in a republic, country founded on representative government, the oldest experiment in self-government, the world's known. But we're at an inflection point now because we're so divided.
Yes.
And that's a really scary place to be. I've been very open, so we'll dive right into it, about the damage I think Trump has caused to the country. And I know you're not representing Donald Trump, but I'm just saying this because I do think that of the small c conservative principles that I hold, he doesn't hold them. That does not by any means mean that I have come to endorse leftist positions. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a progressive. I don't associate with them. I have very friends that are, but I don't subscribe to those ideas. So it leaves me somewhere in the middle. I've been batting for Team Blue because I feel like I don't have much of a choice. Give us like a little bit of insight into where you are and the work you do. Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting that you just said that, because I just had this conversation, which I've had before with a good friend of mine. And I was saying to her, what I don't get is the people, the conservatives, the former conservatives, who don't like Trump. They don't like the fact that he's so personal. They don't like his personality. They don't like, many aspects of Trump have abandoned a lot of conservative principles that they used to hold. And I don't want to name names because these used to be my friends, but people that you can imagine who I'm talking about. Yeah. And I don't really understand that. I get that. I get somebody not liking Trump. I get that. But why abandon positions that you have held to all your life, that you were a public advocate of, that you were a promoter of? One of these people, very well known. I don't want to dump on him or mention his name because I like him.
Okay.
He said last year, I'm evolving on abortion. That's basically saying I have changed my position on abortion. I'm waiting 6 months to tell you about it. But how, really, because of Trump, something as fundamental as that? And so I don't get that. So I'm very happy that the way you described it, the way you did it, and I get all that. I as I said to you before, I don't get party political. I like ideas. I'm going to leave it there, but I don't get the people who have abandoned lifelong positions.
Right. Of course, I can't speak to, and I know, look, I probably am, I am not a gold card member, but I'm definitely in there somewhere with the Never Trumpers, many of whom are former conservatives. I come at it from the Democrat. I was raised a Democrat. I worked for Bob Graham of Florida in the Senate. And then I left the party about 5 years ago, actually, before this podcast, because of Israel and other social issues that, sent me packing. I think that the Bill Clinton's Democratic Party does not exist. But I haven't been able to find any kind of comfortable home in a Trump party. When you say, and I want you to be able to speak so that people don't personally like Trump. Do you mean you feel like you can understand how he's off-putting and his personality is over the top and divisive and all that, but yet his positions are okay? Is that what you mean by personal? I just want to get clarification.
I liked many of his policies.
Okay.
I liked many of the things he did. Most of the things he did, in fact.
Can we talk about them? Because again, in a good faith way, because I have this thing with Trump, because I'm happy to engage in policy, talking about people who tweet the way he does. That gets after a while, how much can you talk about that? No, I do think it's unpresidential, but he passed a big tax cut. He did. Okay. In 2017. When you say you like his policies, because I wanted to bring up some of the things he says he wants to do. Some of it ties into what you do, what you're not, maybe not you, but what's going on at the Heritage Foundation. What other policies did you like? If you had to articulate them besides the tax cut, what are they? Because I don't know what they are.
I liked, for example, how he banned the use of DEI and CRT in the federal workforce and in government contractors.
Right.
I liked that a lot.
Okay.
I liked the people he appointed. Not all. I didn't get Tillerson. I liked Mike Pompeo. I liked the fact how he closed the border. How he told AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the president of Mexico, convinced him. Made him a proposal he couldn't refuse to accept the stay in Mexico policy, and the border was secure. It was not hermetically sealed, but it was not the chaos that we have now. I mean, that was not in.
Well, I don't disagree with you on the border is a disaster, so you have no disagreement for me on that.
That was night and day. I liked the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, they were great.
I liked the fact that Israel was signing or about to sign all these peace accords with its neighbors. In fact, with its neighbors. In fact, as you well know, because you follow the region closely, in all likelihood, the carnage of October 7th, those atrocities took place because Iran ordered it, because Iran wanted to stop Israel from signing a peace deal with Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. And Iran, by the way, and this is the thing that I also helped move me from the Democratic Party, though as an official member of the Democratic Party, having still voted for the majority of their candidates, not all, because I do vote Republican too. The Obama-Iran deal was such a disaster.
And Trump walked away from it.
Yes, and he was right. He was right to do that. He was right. He didn't get credit for the Abraham Accords because the liberal press would never give him credit for
in a rational world. Yeah, Adam, he would have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize for that. Okay. In a rational world, because that was a lot more than we have gotten in a long time, if not ever. Russia, Putin, whom I dislike completely and totally, did not invade a single neighbor while Trump was president. You had the frozen conflicts that remain frozen conflicts, but we did not have what we have right now. And he got serious about China. That was very important.
Can I bring that up for a second? Well, first of all, I'm with you on Putin, but you could also argue that people like Putin and Kim Jong-un, which I think the majority of people know are awful people, were very successful. Putin, especially because he's a former KGB agent. I had this debate with somebody, or discussion, I should say. We're very clever about how they manipulated Trump and blew smoke up his ass. I mean, you do have to know that Trump is so susceptible to flattery that, Mike, if I came out for Trump tomorrow and started this as a Trump podcast, he would say I have the greatest podcast in the world simply because I like him. You do know that. I mean, that is, I'm not saying you change your...
But look at the facts. Look at what happened on the ground, Adam. That's what I care about. Did not invade a single neighbor.
Yeah, well, that's true, but we also know that. But that doesn't mean that the election of Joe Biden caused the invasion of Ukraine either.
Well, hang on a second, Adam.
I don't think that's fair.
Let me push back gently on this. I actually do think that the casus belli of the Ukraine invasion was Afghanistan. When they saw,
that's interesting. Well, that was a bad exit. I agree with that. Yeah,
a bad exit. Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, Adam. That defied the English language. We ran out of adjectives. That was an embarrassment, a humiliation.
Okay. That was not since the fall of Saigon, where the image is as horrible. No, I agree.
It was just disastrous. Nobody got fired. Agree. Not a single military officer offered his resignation. There was no accountability. Okay. And Joe Biden went on the lawn of the White House, embarked and shouted that it was a huge success. Okay. I'm sorry. That must have told every tyrant in the world that it was a fire sale. And from that, we have all the things that are happening. We have October 7th. We have Maduro may be about to invade Guyana. We had
it would be horrible. Yeah.
We had tensions in the Taiwan Straits. I'm sorry. no, that was a direct, in my view, and it's impossible to demonstrate, but in my view, that was the casus belli of the Ukrainian invasion.
Okay, but it's very important to know that, putting aside the way it went down, that the deal that left the Taliban in place, John Bolton is on the record of saying this, was negotiated by Trump. Okay, it is Trump's deal. Every president wanted Afghanistan. They've been talking about it. Okay, Biden finally did it. It was not handled well, but that was Trump. Okay, but that was Trump's deal to leave it. Everyone's carrying on about the Taliban return. Trump made that deal, and John Bolton is no dove.
No, I know John.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that abandoning Bagram would have happened under Trump. I'm not. This is a lot, and the manner in which Kabul was abandoned. It was just. I've spent time in Afghanistan. I've been there I lived in Kabul for a month in 1992, I believe.
What was that like?
It was scary. It was scary. It was when the Mujahideen had just come in and had put Najibullah in prison at the UN compound, and President Mojadedi had just come in. It was the first Mujahideen president. But I went to Afghanistan earlier in 1989. I traveled with the Mujahideen. I traveled with the Hekmatyar people. So I don't know Afghanistan like people who have lived there for years, but I'd studied its history. I have lived there. I have visited there. It was just disastrous, and it led to a lot of the world complete chaos and mayhem we have today, Adam. I will say that very categorically.
Okay. Well, look, I'm not defending. I'm not defending that. But let's go to putting aside the global stage, which is very important. Okay, I think we're going to agree to disagree that Trump would be a better operator on a global stage. I think he's a creature of himself, and I don't think that. I think that sometimes he's lucked out. Sometimes it's just been a matter of circumstance. But let me move on though to my great opposition, which I want to ask you about, because from what I know, what I've read about, and what I've read that you've written, I can't believe you'd be for this, but I want to give you an opportunity, because here's what Trump is proposing. Okay, these are the things he says. So I want to ask you know what I mean? Like, people who've left the Republican Party over Trump, again, fair game. There's a lot on here. You have 91 criminal charges, but let's put it aside for a second. Trump tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power. January 6th is unacceptable. We know it was real. It's all Tucker Carlson's full of shit. The images are there to see that. I can't believe we don't agree that all of us can't say that was horrible and this happened. And to me, that is disqualifying. But he's the only president to stop the peaceful transfer of power in my lifetime.
But I said that was horrible. I said that the January 6th riot was awful. Okay. I've written that.
Well, no, I didn't say you didn't. I'm saying I want to hear what you have to say about it, though. Isn't that disqualifying? I mean, isn't that it?
No, I don't think so. And I don't. This is a riot that lasted 3 hours.
Yeah.
These knuckleheads were awful. What took place was awful, and I would say, I'm not making a comment on the sentences they have received, and we can get into the violence that took place for months prior to that, and in the United States under the
on BLM riots. Okay,
the BLM riots.
Well, with me, you have someone who will forthrightly, who did, I never showed time, condemned it. They burned cities, they burned buildings. I'm with you.
For you, and if you look at, and if you compare the arrests, the time, the sentencing, the years in prison that were sentenced to, it doesn't approximate. We're talking about the worst violent uprising in the United States, the costliest in terms of losses, between $1 and $2 billion, according to the Insurance Institute. And we have had a deep cultural change that hopefully will not become permanent as a result of these riots. So it's not like we're pristine and we see political violence for the first time on January 6th because we have lived in a vacuum for the eight prior months.
I agree. Oh, listen, I not only was appalled by that. I was appalled that everybody was told if they left their house, they would drop dead, except when the BLM riots and marches started, then you could leave your house. I thought that was bullshit too. And crazy, you know, and that everyone standing together in groups of people didn't matter. But if you left your house to, you know, go see your grandmother or go to church, you were a traitor or something. No, but again, let's try to generate, or I try, and I think that's what I love about having you on, less heat, more light. Right. Trump, though. Okay. Great. I'm glad you condemn. We both condemn all sorts of violence. Trump is promising to pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. He's calling them hostages. Hold on. 500 of them assaulted police officers. I mean, where I go is I sit there and watch the BLM riots and all the violence on the left and all the horrible rhetoric, the hatred of Jews and Israel that's going on now. And it appalls me, sickens me to my stomach. But then I have to come back and say, but my choice is this. I mean, you've got an authoritarian vibe going on, to say least. That doesn't mean there aren't authoritarian elements on the left. They are. And you wrote a book about them, okay, about Marxism. It's real. But doesn't the other side make you quit? Don't you ever stop and say, not a conservative. I'm not saying abandon conservatism, but Trump isn't really a conservative, and what he represents is bad for the country. I just wonder, don't you? Because I wrestle.
Adam, I'm not here to tell you how to vote, and you know that I told you I didn't want to come in and have a debate on party politics. Well, I liked the Trump years and this of what happened in the country. I think the country was headed in the right direction, and I think, you know, if anything, he was, you know, he could have gone further in affecting conservative policy, and if he gets reelected again, I hope he does. Oh, you know, we don't know what's going to happen, right? We're still months away from November. A lot can happen. I do want to see conservative policy enacted. I do. I'm a conservative. I think it's good for the country.
Right. Okay.
It's good for Americans.
Okay. Let's talk about policy, though, because we're not going to talk party politics. That's absolutely right. We did say that. I want to go into, because there's been so much, and you're at the Heritage Foundation, which put this together. There has been so much rhetoric, and I want to try to get through it. I know it's 900 pages of bureaucratic prose here, but what's known as Project 2025. It has been described as the next great authoritarian attack on the United States. It's well, no, hold on. I'm just saying the way it's been described.
No, I wasn't doing that to you.
Oh, okay. I say that the Heritage Foundation, I went through a number of the policy objectives. Some of them are standard conservative fare for sure. I don't have to agree with some of them, or a lot of them. It depends upon what I have questions about, and I can't quite understand, is what about this excessive concentration on the executive branch? But before we get into it, in your words, you're there and your organization's behind it. Heritage Foundation has been around a long time. It's been a very important intellectual think tank on the right. What is Project 2025, and where are we going wrong when we think that this does pose a genuine threat to democracy?
First, let me correct, and this is a mischaracterization that you hear a lot. I'm not accusing you of doing it. You must have picked this up.
Yeah.
Actually, what we like to see is a strong legislative branch. Right now, the permanent bureaucracy, the administrative state, has sucked more power from the first article branch, the legislative branch, than it has from the executive. What Congress does right now is it passes legislation that are kind of like empty Christmas trees. Then the administrative state comes in and fills up with Christmas balls and lights and tinsel. And candy.
You mean like federal agencies then sort of make law?
Yeah, federal agencies legislate without legislating. They take this empty vessel, this empty skeleton, and make it muscular. That should not happen. Congress should legislate, and I think the courts are trying to correct for this in the way they're looking at Chevron deference. So I think it's a mischaracterization to say, was it with a strong executive? No, it's a strong three branches. In fact, if I'm old enough to have read the Constitution in school. There's only three branches in the Constitution. The fourth branch, the administrative state, doesn't really exist. nor should it exist, for the very simple reason that we live in a democracy where government is accountable to the people, and they're unaccountable. Nobody can fire them. The voters cannot fire them. Now, what is Project 2025? And just as I have not read Marx's Capital from cover to cover,
Yes.
I have not read Project 2025
Lucky you.
from cover to cover. But I have, obviously, I've read many parts of it, and I've written parts of it, obviously.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
one of the authors of Project 2025.
Okay, so that's why you're on.
You can find my byline. I wrote one of the chapters.
Okay.
And what it is something we have done since the age of Reagan with Mandate for Leadership, in which have filled a book with policy formulations, which is what we do. That is our business.
Yes.
We formulate policy. So we have done that for a new conservative leader. And by the way, I was on an earlier show in which I said this. We would love for Biden to implement these policies. I am sitting right now, Adam, in the building that produced the welfare reform bill that Bill Clinton signed into law in 1996, which he called the highlight of his 8 years in office. My colleagues in floors below me worked on that bill, worked on that policy formulation. So it wouldn't be the first time that a Democratic president. We would love for Biden to take Project 2025 and implement it, or as many of the.
Well, as I said to you, the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton doesn't exist. So
well, Bob Graham, you talked about.
I worked for Bob Graham. Well, that party doesn't exist. I was a member of that party.
There's no Bob Graham.
No. And Bill Clinton not only balanced the budget with the Republican Congress, but met people in the middle and met people where they were. He spoke to everybody. If Bill Clinton did welfare reform because he spent enough time on the stump as a governor of Arkansas, and then as president, listening to people saying, hey, I'm a working class man or woman, I'm getting screwed, and all my tax dollars are going to what basically aid to families, dependent children, right? Endless money without any accountability. And he said, it's going to be workfare now, basically. And I knew that you guys were at a role in that. But I'm for that. I mean, that's hardly authoritarian. That was a great policy change that had gone on too long. Right. But in this, and I'm again, I only have my outline of it, and I don't have 900 pages. And as I said, bless both of us for not having to endure more Karl Marx than anybody wants to read. It's a complete, utter bullshit nonsense.
I was not comparing Project 2025 to Capital. No. I'm saying the two weighty tomes.
There's better ways to live our life, even with the one you've co-authored. I say that respectfully. This idea, though, of federal bureaucrats, this immediate firing of federal bureaucrats, of civil servants, I'm not understanding what this does, only because from where I sit, you can't have a bunch of loyalists in any branch of the government. Okay, if we believe in democracy, we elect a legislature. The court is not elected. The Supreme Court's not elected, and the federal government is the purview of the president, but not to purge people that disagree with them in federal agencies. Can you speak to that? Because that's the thing that's getting the most press.
Yeah, because they should be giving technical advice and scientific advice. They should not be in policy making. The people vote for a policy blueprint when they vote for a president and when they vote for Congress.
Okay.
The people vote, and the bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C., of which there are many million, should implement the policies the people have voted for. Oh my goodness, what is so totalitarian about that? That is all we're saying. That if you are a bureaucrat, you have no reason, nor power, nor moral reason to get in the way of policy, to sabotage policy, to slow walk it, to refuse to carry it out. And that is what happens way too many times. I was in government. Yeah. I was a speechwriter in the State Department in the Bush administration. I've been in meetings where people said to me, Mike, you know that but for 537 votes, Al Gore would be president today, right? Yeah. So we should not do what you want done. And I was like, who cares? Who cares? Al Gore is practicing his second inaugural in front of his mirror now, shaving. He's not
Okay,
president.
well, Mike, I say this respectfully. Al Gore conceded the election.
He actually, what was the phraseology that he used?
When?
At the end, when he in December.
In December of 2000?
Yeah, he said something. The way he put it.
Okay, but
I forget the sentence that he used.
Mike.
Okay.
Donald Trump has lied. Donald Trump hasn't conceded the 2020 election as of today. That's just lie. He's lied. Not that you're lying, but Trump's lied about it. Come on.
But Adam, the point that I'm making is that not what the point I was making about Al Gore is that people in the State Department were telling me, no, we should not carry out this push policy because he nearly did not win.
Hey, I'll throw one your way. When people say Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, I say she didn't win the presidency. So what difference does it make? Because California voted her in. So what? That's not what the country voted for.
They said more than that, Adam. They said that Trump did not win. They said he was an illegitimate president.
That's true.
It was a Russian hoax.
That's horrible. Stacey Abrams lied too about her election.
They said many things.
Okay, but
you don't hear me talking about it now.
No. But hold on. Trump is running for re-election. The third time he's going to be on the ballot, and he's the only president who hasn't conceded an election, and he's still not telling the truth about the election, which is why those knuckleheads, as you call them, and I call them insurrectionists, not everybody who was there ran into the Capitol, but those that did were acting upon his lies. So, I mean, that's just hard to deny. And I know you condemn January 6th. I'm not saying you're apologizing for it, but one can say that and leave. It's like the way, look, I can be very disappointed about things that a president I voted for supports. My whole thing is we don't have to agree with the president on everything.
Well, I didn't mean to trigger you with a reference to Al Gore.
No, you didn't. No. I'm agreeing that yes, that's a silly example that he 537 votes. I agree, but it's still. But back to this, okay?
Back to the permanent state, which is the permanent bureaucracy, which is what we were discussing. I've seen a lot of it in my office framed. I have it framed on my wall. I have how the State Department edited Reagan's speech, the Brandenburg Gate speech. I have it. I can email you a copy.
Sure. I'd love to see it. I'm not doubting they did. Yeah.
Somebody wrote, "Sir, this is a wasted opportunity." I think 16 times they took out that Mr. Gorbachev tore down this wall. One of the most famous lines in American history.
An amazing speech. One of my favorites. Well, first of all, look. The State Department in this country and their bureaucratic ease and their, Ronald Reagan led with peace through strength. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand. Right. And they don't like that. They like this sort of like mealy mouth bureaucratic. Same Israel now. Well, Hamas shouldn't be defeated because we can't have a war. So therefore everybody should go back to their corners until it happens again, of course. But that's
look at that. Look at the many people in the State Department that we hear are seething because we're supporting our friend and ally, the State of Israel, to stay alive by getting rid of a terrorist organization. And the people at the State Department are seething about this. Nobody elected them.
Well, there's a famous saying, the State Department is Arabist. You've probably heard that. That's a long time thing. It's just unfortunate. But by the way, can I just go back to something though, because this does relate to what role the president should play. Okay.
What? Yeah. Is that a question or you're asking me?
No, I'm about to finish something. So we all agree that we elect our legislature. I agree. Okay. No matter where you stand on what Supreme Court decision did what, is that the sort of kicking the can to the court on all of these major issues for 70 years. Some conservatives haven't liked it. Liberals haven't liked it. Some have said been good for liberals. Some have said bad for conservatives, etc. The legislature, because we have a dysfunctional legislature, doesn't ever seem to do the things it needs to do. So there's like a frustration, right, that comes from, let's say, a Republican Party that wins an election because they feel that they can't get their policies enacted. And then the courts, they rule on things. Democrats do the same thing. But I just haven't heard about taking that approach, taking that frustration, I should say, to the executive branch and sort of oddly being a party that's supposed to be limited in government. President, by the way, constitutionally, and you know this, has very limited power. Why are we empowering the executive branch more than we need to because we're angry about what the legislature did or didn't do? That doesn't seem like a co-equal system. That seems like we just are mad the legislature isn't doing what we're doing.
Well, that's not what I want to do, and that's not what we
okay,
want.
I'm asking.
We want to empower the legislative branch. We want to empower all three branches.
Okay.
That as the founders intended.
Right.
We want them to carry out the constitutionally mandated work.
Okay. So
we want Congress. We want Congress here. If let's say the two branches.
Okay.
Setting aside the judiciary.
Yeah.
The executive and the legislative. We want Congress to have more power than it has at the present moment to do more of the legislative work than it used to do. That it has just completely abdicated.
Right. I want to talk about China as it relates, because you mentioned it earlier, and I didn't respond to that specifically because it's something in the 2025 project that I'm just not understanding about China. Okay. We're going to quote, end economic engagement with China. I'm not understanding why in any world. And by the way, I'm with you on that. China's fucking awesome. Okay. But I don't understand how the next great superpower is somehow one we're not going to engage with. Am I misinterpreting this? Because that's what it says in the project.
Well, I think, and I haven't read that part, but embedded in your question,
I don't understand it. Yeah,
embedded in your question, you just said the next superpower. You know, nobody says that.
What do you mean?
Nobody said. You know, nobody. Sorry, I misphrased that.
Sure.
Nobody had. That doesn't need to be. China does not need to be the next superpower.
I'm not saying it with glee. It just looks that way.
But I mean, I think I'm older than you.
You are.
I remember the time when the Japanese were going to eat the world. I remember the time when there were many, Japanologists who were writing, we need to submit to them, or we need to learn Japanese, or we need to have an industrial policy in this country because Japan, by golly, has an industrial policy. And then, the president of central bank, Mieno, break the bubble, and Japan fell apart after 1990. Fell apart as a rising potential adversary, economic adversary.
To this point, although I was younger, I was 13. I was in New York with my parents, and we went to Tiffany's. This is relevant to what you're saying.
I love
it.
Tiffany's.
It was swarms, Mike, of Japanese people in those days around the counter buying like $10,000 Tiffany heart necklaces, like they were buying, I don't know, Kleenex, or just, pack of gum. I mean, it looked as if, you're right, that the power of the Japanese currency and the power of Japan was so great that they were treating our goods and services like they were candy, like within Woolworths or something.
They were putting in the cafes in Tokyo, they were putting gold in their coffee. If that should have been assigned to us. And I remember traveling through Tokyo. I used to cover Tokyo from Hong Kong or from Seoul, two places where I was posted. Yeah. I remember when the Japanese Imperial Palace, the land of it, was worth more than all of Los Angeles. Obviously, that wasn't the case. But it was a time when, so the point I'm trying to make, I don't want to get caught in 1980 memorabilia, is that about 60% of and I'm not a sinologist. I've spent 10 years in Asia.
But I mean, but it's Trump runs on China, and I never understand the take. I just find it, I don't know, it feels like braggadocio to me. It doesn't feel like there's anything underneath that.
But about 60% of Chinese GDP is still the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises. We don't know what state they're in. Their balance sheets are a word that I cannot mention in a family podcast. We don't know what state they're in.
You can curse on this podcast. Yeah,
I can't because
you can't. I know it's not your style. I know you're a gentleman. I understand.
but you can curse. I don't mind if you curse at all. So please go ahead. Green light.
Thank you.
So I tell you, I don't know if I told you this before. I was the editor of the Wall Street Journal Asia's editorial page.
Yeah, Hong Kong based. Yeah,
based in Hong Kong for 8 years, and I wrote editorials, saying, democratic engagement is going to work because that is going to lead to a political opening, and is going to make the Chinese people free. I was wrong. Today, my very good friend, a very good man, Jimmy Lai, is behind bars in isolation without air conditioning in a Hong Kong prison. He's a man in his 70s. He's going to die in prison without seeing his children again. He's the world's most famous political prisoner, my friend Jimmy Lai. And I was wrong. I was wrong in thinking that economic growth was going to lead to a political opening. In fact, what we're doing, because the economic setup is so tilted in their favor, because they don't practice real capitalism, is that engagement with them at this point will only enrich them and make them more powerful. And indeed, that would mean that they would become a superpower and not us remaining the power that we have, having the freedom that we have, having no foreign power be able to dictate our future, but us Americans through the ballot box being able to dictate our futures. So I think that's what's behind that, and I agree with that. That is not braggadocio. That is a hard-nosed understanding of the way China, the People's Republic of China, nothing about the 1.4 wonderful Chinese people practice their style of capitalism, which is not really capitalism.
Do you think all the years of China having most favored nations, this goes back to the Bush 41, even earlier than that, well, Bill Clinton famously deedling trade from human rights, which is where we are now. We have not, to your point, all the economic engagement hasn't produced political freedom, not to spend too much time in China. But do you think that was a real mistake of American policy?
Yeah. Letting them into the World Trade Organization was a mistake. We all made mistakes. I owned up to my mistakes as a writer.
Sure.
I made a mistake. Yeah, I don't have to say that.
I appreciate. I admit that. I always say on this podcast, "What if I'm wrong?" That's why I love talking to people. And I mean, this is not the be all end all. Everything you see even today is set in stone. I'm more picking your brain, having been a Hong Kong based journalist.
Right. I mean, I was rereading a piece that I wrote in 1997. This one was a signed column, in which I discussed this very issue in 1997. I discussed the threats, and I still conclude that economic engagement is worth it. And I should have heeded my own warning.
Yeah. As a segue, because I want to get into your book, which congrats, by the way, on the release, folks. This is a very serious book. The title is going to turn off, of course, anybody even remotely with a D by their name or whatever, and it shouldn't, because it's a great history, especially about. And I think even I think it's unfair when people say Democrats are, pro-Marx. Many of them are not. They believe in private property. Okay.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yes. And also,
the woke are 8% of the population.
What's that?
The woke are 8% of the population.
They're 8%, right? They're 8% of the population, and they're nurtured and aided and abetted by their lunatic professors at schools I went to, who can't get over the fact that Marx failed in 1848, let alone the failure, as you write so well, about Germany and Italy in the 20th century, and that complete nutcase Antonio Gramsci, who I was educated in. It's just such utter rubbish. But academia is a lot of rubbish, even though I loved being in it and going to graduate school and learning a ton. I took, critical thinking means reading stuff that even they give you and having critical abilities to say this sucks, but unfortunately there's a lot of brainwashing, which is what you saw after October 7th. However, to the point of Marxism, before we go there, do you still think, though, I mean, you have the Chinese Communist Party, which is a horrible organization that we've been, open with really since Nixon, but they have this sort of weird economic capitalism as long as you cut them into the deal, but they're still political tyrants. Marxism, before we get into your book, I mean, are they still essentially Marxists over there, or have they muddled it into some kind of, we're like the mafia, pay us off and we'll look the other way, yet we'll imprison you if you challenge us?
I think the word thank you me is have they become corporatists, which is the economic blueprint of Mussolini, of Salazar in Portugal, of Franco in Spain, under whom I lived as a kid in Spain.
You lived under Franco?
Yeah. I'm that old. Yeah, I lived in Franco. I lived in Spain under Franco, and of the PRI in Mexico, the Partido Revolucionario Institucional. Which ruled Mexico for many years. They were corporatists. They believed in the existence of companies and profits, but the companies had to answer to the government had to do what the government said. John O'Sullivan, a very funny guy, who's a speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher. He covered Salazar for the London Times. He tells a story of Salazar going to a village in Portugal and saying, and in this village, you're going to have a sardine canning factory within a month. And he would get back to Lisbon and order the company to open a sardine canning factory in the town in Portugal that he had just been visiting. I don't think the CCP is corporatist. I think they're Marxist. Under Xi Jinping, they definitely, you may argue, and you could make that point, that under Hu Jintao or Xiao Zemin, there was and even under Deng Xiaoping, there was a drift toward corporatism. But I think that is ending. And this is what I read in the analysis, that I don't have that much time to read Chinese analysis. I do.
No, I agree with that. I think, the post-Mao years look like, well, we didn't know what they would look like, but I think Nixon did the right thing at the time. But he was subdividing the Soviet Union from China too, which was a brilliant move. But I think it seemed like it was going that way, which is why I think American policy from both parties was so informed by the MFN, most favored nations view, right? That economic engagement would lead to a political liberalization, which has not happened.
Had not happened. And in fact, the reverse is happening. Xi Jinping and his henchmen are introducing more and more Marxist collectivism, Marxist central planning. This is what I read. I haven't been in China in years. For a time, I wasn't allowed to go. So my visa was canceled.
Right.
So not the first country that does that to me. But no, I think we should take them at their word. And when I tell you, and as I started this very enjoyable podcast with you, telling you I'm a Roman Catholic, you should believe that, even though, by Roman Catholic, I mean a strong believer that Jesus Christ was a practicing Jew. All his friends was a practicing. His mother was a practicing Jew.
Yes.
I'm very aware of that.
Yes. What you're saying because communism abhorred religion. Is that what you mean?
No. What I'm saying is they tell you. Sorry, the analogy went too far.
Okay.
When they tell you they're Marxists, we should take them at their word.
Oh, I agree with that. Absolutely. Well, I also think that a lot of so let's talk about your book, okay? Because I think there's something to be said. I think there's a lot of nuance in your book that I love because it's scholarly. But I also think what I think happens is, and this because you're not here to hawk for a party. I respect that. Fox News and the right demonize every Democrat as the next Che Guevara. And the Democrats turn every Republican into Hitler and Goebbels. Everything I don't like is Hitler to the left, and everything on the right is everything I don't like is not just socialism, communism.
Right.
But what I think your book is driving at is the way in which mainstream institutions, which I have written about, and you should read some of my Substack, since October 7th, especially, has created this really toxic, specious binary of oppressor versus oppressed, lumping everybody into these oppression Olympics by virtue of the color of their skin and by identity. Of course, Jews don't count because we don't count, obviously. And therefore, there's a dividing line. So divined by an ideological kind of amorphous authority, wherever they are in academia and elsewhere, that while of course 8% of the country could be woke, right? There is a lot of thinking that has poisoned the minds of our young people about hatred of America and hatred of Israel and hatred of everything that, by the way, from the comfort of their own plush mom home that they live in on their flat screen with their expensive iPad can complain about.
Adam, you have put this really, really well. I really thank you for reading my book.
Sure.
It is that nugget, that boiling down of all human relations to a conflict between the oppressed and the oppressor. Right. And that, by the way, comes from the first page of the manifesto of 1848. Right. Marx and his sugar daddy Engels write this, that all of human history boils down to an epic struggle between the oppressed and their oppressors. That, and I want to jump to something else, but to shortcut this, that is what gives us the October 8th effect, which is college students taking to the streets and denouncing the women who were gang raped, the people who were incinerated, and supporting the terrorists who carried out these atrocities because they have put them into these categories, and the Palestinians are the oppressed and the Israeli Jews are the oppressors. And it's a settler society and it's colonization, blah, 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 blah. So this is why people are rubbing their eyes. People like Bill Ackman and others are saying, wait, Bill Maher saying, wait, I didn't sign up for this. What the heck is this?
I'm with them. Yeah.
Right. So that is pure Marxism, but there's many different layers here. And if you could just give me 30 seconds here.
Sure.
So Marxism goes through, because you read my book, and before this, Marxism goes through an evolution in the 1920s and 30s because of the failure of the Italian and German revolutions. Right. And they begin to ask hard questions. They say, well, culture matters. Marx had this expression of the forces of production, and Gramsci says, well, culture is also a force of production, and culture matters, and they become cultural Marxists, and then these ideas flower here in the 60s. The 60s kids begin to take over the industries that make meaning, the commanding heights of the culture, and many of the gatekeepers of these institutions believe in these things, but there's a second layer in which these cultural thinkers and these intellectuals, are really not followers of Marx, but followers of Gramsci and Lukács and Marcuse and Horkheimer, and they don't really think that's Marxist. And there's a third layer of people who said, wait a second, I'm not a Marxist. But the analogy I often use is, Adam, if you believe in deficit spending to spur economic growth, and you believe in cutting taxes to throttle economic growth because you fear inflation, you are a Keynesian. Yeah. Whether you have ever read John Maynard Keynes or not, you are a Keynesian.
Sure.
You and I and English speakers are constantly quoting Shakespeare.
Sure.
Without knowing we're quoting Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
Shakespeare has given us the cultural or the King James Bible. Yeah. And I'm a Catholic, I'm quoting the King James Bible. And it's given us the cultural matrix. And so a lot of the gatekeepers of the cultural institutions who think in these ways, who say, I'm not a Marxist, but are completely controlled by Marxist ideas. And in fact, it was Lord Keynes himself who said we're all ruled by the ideas of defunct philosophers, whether we know it or not, and defunct economists. It is true, especially with his beliefs. And there's the final layer, two more layers of people who were intimidated by the riots into accepting fallacies, such as the fact that we live in systems of oppression.
Which riots? BLM riots?
The BLM riots.
Yeah.
That we have systemic racism, that the organizing idea of our country is white supremacy. I'm not denying that racists exist. No. I'm just denying that the idea, the germane idea of America is white supremacy. It's a fallacy, and they enact a raft of cultural changes that the American people reject and never voted for. That's what I call NextGen Marxism. Just to be very clear, thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain it.
Yes, of course. No, I mean, I think what I'm driving at is that what Marxist thinking, even for people who do not subscribe to it, because if you literally said we're not going to have a capitalist society, then you'd really see riots, and they'd be on the left too. Trust me, they don't want to lose their DoorDash. But my point, there goes my avocado toast. But I think what I'm driving at is the divisiveness inherent, the revolutionary impulse that's written into Marx's idea of a false consciousness. So you don't know you're oppressed, therefore you should be. That has come down through the ages. So that which divides America against itself, because the idea of America is that, we improve as a society by virtue of what we do individually. We're not here to be collective entities, and Marxism insists that we are all, well, originally it was an economic argument, now culturally, you're all here, we're here, the revolution's coming. And the revolution, by the way, isn't coming, because that's not what America is about. But that's what has frustrated so many people who are progressive, because remember what keeps me I say real or sane or averse to progressive thinking is I know human nature is nasty. And I also know that you can't continually pass law after law after law to improve it and to socially engineer it. That's just not true. It's utopian thinking. So all we can do in our society is hopefully mitigate the worst of it, right? But protect the institutions that have worked in the United States, from the rule of law to democracy to free markets to capitalism to the idea of unity. As an American, you identified you're an American. You're not a Cuban American. You know, you are, but you're not, like I said, I'm Adam. I'm not defined by my sexuality or my religion. I'm defined by me. And I don't want anybody to say you get this because of that. No.
I couldn't. Your last soliloquy of the last 3 minutes is something that I loved. The overlap in the Venn diagram is just a flat pancake.
Yes.
I completely, you have it completely. I can only add to that. Thank God that I came to these shores in 1974, many years before Hispanics were invented by the activists in the federal bureaucracy. Yeah. Some people did try to come along to try to tell me that I should be aggrieved against this country, that I should harbor resentment against this country because of the ill treatment I had received here. And that was all nonsense to me. Nonsense, pure nonsense. I was overjoyed to be in America. I was overjoyed about the fact that I was becoming an American, and still am. And so this idea that we have to instill grievances into the categories we create in the first place in order to carry out revolution is heinous, is anti-human, and is going to, if allowed to succeed, and that's the reason I wrote my book, because I don't want it to succeed, it would kill the chicken that laid the golden eggs. This is still, as Lincoln said, the last best hope of man.
Agreed.
The last best hope of earth.
Yeah.
And you and I agree on this. And we may disagree on some important political issues, but we agree on this. And this is important because we have to salvage America. We cannot allow them to destroy it.
Well, I think to your point, too, I think the thing that also has happened, and again, this is what's so important about any political debate, is there could be a set of ideas, for example, and I do subscribe to some of them that have maybe a more active role for government, maybe come out of traditional kind of FDR Truman like democratic thinking, very different from today. But what crept into university thinking and what academia and these other institutions, cultural institutions have done in social media, we haven't even mentioned that. I don't want to be negligent here, has so changed it since the advent of the iPhone, changing every riot covered, every war that's covered, every event. I mean, the reason that Hamas is winning the PR war, not the war, the PR war, is because this war is being done under a microscope by a hostile way of thinking. The way of thinking goes that terrorism, right, can't just be condemned as evil because it's resistance to a lot of people, or it's based on oppression. What ends up happening then is your morally relativistic positions lead you down the garden path to hell, because you don't realize in that line of thinking what you're doing. Instead of saying, hey, no, October 7th, the sleeping giant was awakened. That's what's happening. You don't like, it's a tragedy what happened to the workers at Jose Andres' kitchen, but Jose Andres does not govern our foreign policy. Okay. Or the world's. And it's horrible. War zones are complicated. I'm not a general. I'm not a soldier, but I'm saying it's who decides these rules. Well, look at how people pile on, because there's no world now, right, where we can all just say terrorism is bad. We've got so many people who've been led to believe, oh, we have a villain. Yeah, poor people on October 7th, but what about those people? Instead of saying, if you really care about Palestinian people, you never want them living under Hamas. You never would want Hamas to stay in power.
Exactly.
But there's virtue signalers and liars and clowns and Marxists and all that stuff, through social media. My point of saying this is this is where I think that sort of Marxist way of thinking has become, it's not a gotcha. It's not simple as this is Marxist or that's Marxist, but it's insidious.
And as Bill Maher said, if there's one good thing that can come from these heinous acts that took place on October 7th, is that it's finally opening the eyes of many people, that teaching kids to look at life through this prism of the oppressed and the oppressor is going to produce horrible outcomes. Um, uh, Israel has apologized. Israel will investigate. I think many Americans, including our president, are being very selective when they express outrage. A family was killed in Afghanistan, a family of 7 by an American drone. They were innocent. There was no White House statement. There was no, State
Oh,
Department
yeah.
statement.
You talk about Obama or Biden?
No, Biden.
Oh, yeah. In Afghanistan. Yeah.
The same number of people who were regrettably killed Jose Andres' kitchen in Gaza, and nobody's justifying that. What I'm saying is that we have to understand that Israel, if it made a mistake, it's got a free press. It's going to discuss it openly. It is a
and
democracy.
That's key. Remember, Israel has to fight because they are a democracy.
Yeah.
Not fight. A free press keeps them to a certain degree accountable. I hate the word accountable because I don't think what Israel's doing is wrong. But I mean, in the sense of honest, where Hamas has to answer to nobody. They're not even a state.
Right.
You know?
And look, a free press is so. If some people have said, actually, the studies have been done that there has never been a famine in a country with a free press.
Right.
That a free press will prevent, because most famines are man-made.
Yeah.
So it's and Israel has a democratic process where the government, if would be held accountable if it needed to be held accountable. This is a huge difference from a state that is being run by a terrorist group.
Sure.
That relished and were overjoyed by the killings of October 7th.
Right.
And our students who have been taught in this NextGen Marxist factories that are universities supported that.
Yeah.
And that should open a lot of people's eyes. And my book explains how we got there.
Yeah, no, it does. And as I've said repeatedly, I would have said it before October 7th. I said the moral equivalence makes that moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. It is obscene and morally bereft. I always say you're just morally bereft. You can think of it as you want. You can come at me with all the facts about Israel's military action. I said, hey, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. 2,200 Americans were killed. What did we do? Right? What do we do?
Yeah,
now there's debate over Oppenheimer. Japan would have. No, Japan wasn't going to surrender. So everyone can stop the nonsense. Stop the nonsense. But again, you've got cultural lefties, Japanese. They're not even historians going on TikTok saying, "See how evil America was." It's like, oh my God. This is the problem. Everything's being relitigated under a microscope through a presentist lens because social media does it. That's a much larger problem. But and your book locates that about how a lot of the early BLM riots 10 years ago or protests were covered by the iPhone and what that amounted to, how the organization built itself through social media. But here we are, right? We have an election coming up, right? How would you, I ask you this because I think you can give an honorable conservative answer. What's a conservative vision for the United States, in your opinion?
We
few
have
pillars.
We have to. Yeah, no, I'm very happy to answer that. We have to undo a lot of the gains that the hardcore left that you and I have been discussing have made. What we're seeing, and I hope this doesn't sound as hyperbole, is in my mind, Adam, cultural genocide.
Cultural genocide. How do you mean?
Cultural genocide.
No, what do you mean by that?
The dismantling of the American system, the American culture, and the people who want to do this are very open. The woman that Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, just appointed as head of DEI, you can Google it because there's video of her. It's a 10-minute video of her in which she is an American diplomat in charge of upholding, of defending American interests and the interests of Americans. She is saying that we have to dismantle the system of the United States. We cannot allow that to happen.
No,
we cannot. So
I think that's a real extreme view she's taking, is my point.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think that, this is what's behind. If you say, Adam, if you accept that we are systemically racist, then the only logical solution is systemic overhaul. Okay? If you say that we're institutionally oppressive, the only institutional overhaul. And no, America can be improved, should be improved, needs to be improved. I agree with you. You take on humanity. We're flawed. We have bad chips. We're never going to have utopia.
And it's okay. By the way, it's also okay to say America can do better in areas of race and class. We can do better. That doesn't mean that you that's my statement. Not
and America has done better.
Yes.
I don't know how.
Well, I mean, we have to honor progress. No, we've made of course. This isn't 1950.
But you may. Do you remember the? Oh no, you don't remember the 70s. I remember the 70s. You know, the stuff that went down in the 70s would not be acceptable today. No. That's progress.
Yeah, of course.
That is good stuff. You know, the civil rights. The fact that, you know, if you and I owned a lunch counter in Alabama.
Yeah.
In 1963, and we wanted to sell a sandwich to a black couple, we will be prevented by the law from doing that.
Of course, yeah.
That does not happen anymore. That's not that is incredible progress.
Yes.
We have to celebrate it and cherish it. Who was this that was saying the other day? I think it was Coleman Hughes. And
he's great.
But Jonathan Haidt also says this.
Yeah.
And this data to back it. In 2013, all racial groups were saying that racial relations were great, that they had never been better. What happens in 2013? The Black Lives Matter gets well, you see, that's Jonathan Haidt. I go back to Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
Black Lives Matter is founded June. It really takes off in 2014. And in Ferguson, it becomes a movement. With a lot of leftists and Marxists from all over the world and country gathering, including a lot of Palestinians who invite Patrisse Cullors, one of the main founders of BLM, to go to the West Bank and make videos there. Sure. I forget where she went, but it was in the West Bank. So we were approached in 2013. All groups were reporting, relations are good, and then. Fast forward 11 years, relations are not good now, and everybody believes they're not good.
I think that there's a key takeaway here as we're getting toward the end of the show, but that this is important because I think it should inform the things. And I have a lot of agreement with you. I never will vote for Donald Trump. I don't think he's a conservative. We don't have to debate it over and over. I think January 6th is I think there's so many things that are unacceptable about that. Yes, I'd vote for somebody else over that because I have two choices. I'm not going to throw away my vote. You know, I mean, if they felt that we were a three-party country, maybe there's some center-right party, which is probably where I'd be more comfortable, but there isn't one. The performative outrage, the videoing, which I just was saying about the war being under a microscope, the constant TikToking, the constant outrage that's being stoked online has provoked and divided and misled us in so many ways, have harmed race relations, have harmed. That doesn't mean that things can't be improved, but have led people to believe that the world is one big hell in a handbasket and let's keep videoing it till we reach the apocalypse or something. Some of it's crazy. But I say this in good faith as we end. I think that the country needs two honorable parties. I want a center-right or Tory. I mean, you can call it conservative or whatever, counterweight to the Democrat. We can't just have the Democrats and a party that's Trumpist. That to me is not healthy for the country. But those people like you who are thinkers, who are working in Heritage and other places like that, I don't have to agree with every policy. I don't have to agree with the left either. Let's not snapshot performative outrage from clowns and lunatics and make policy based on it. Which is why my point of this is your book is so good, because you give an intellectual analysis of how this invades people's thinking. But let's just not, again, weaponize the federal government. It's an overused word, I know, or overpower the federal government to own the libs. That is not a policy. Okay. That's vengeance.
And that's not what I want to do or we want to do, Adam.
Okay. I'm just saying that I'm not saying you specifically, but I'm saying I get it. There's an assault on XYZ and you could go watch TikTok tonight, Mike, and you'll never want to work again. You kill yourself. Okay. God forbid. No, it's horrible. I see the things they say about Israel and Jews and oh my God, if it was really only about Netanyahu or the quote unquote occupation, you wouldn't see swastikas everywhere. You wouldn't see destroy America flags. You wouldn't see that.
Can I give advice here to your viewers?
Sure.
Do not, something that I do, if I'm going through Twitter and I see a fight where people are beating up some girl, I don't watch that.
That's good.
Yeah. I don't watch. I just say I don't want my soul polluted by that. Yeah. Don't be a voyeur of human cruelty, especially when it's children. Just flip that away.
Right. And the images are there. And, I mean, speaking of that, and this is sort of contradicts what you just said, but, out of sensitivity to the victims, only certain people have been allowed to see the 47 minutes of tape of GoPro of Hamas's savagery, which is what it was.
Right.
And if you notice, that has not been released to the world. But they will show you a dying child. Well, but they will show you every dying child and whatever, which of course can be heartbreaking. But you say, the world, there's a part of me, right? I don't like voyeur cruelty, but there is a part of me, and I still don't know where I stand, that wishes the world could see this, to see the rape and the torture and the mutilation, only because the images have cast such aspersions on the only democratic ally in the Middle East to such a point. Now, that's not, thankfully, my members of my family weren't murdered, and they wouldn't want that, I'm sure.
But that is different. That is not a snuff film. That is not gratuitous violence. That is violence that must be watched because it happened, and because that story is not being told. And we must see the evil that was done on October 7th to better understand October 8th.
And we have to be able to call evil out when we see it.
Right.
And that's where we've, instead of well, I wouldn't go that far. It's like, well, if you can't call that evil, then guess what? You've just lost the plot.
Right.
And that's been a big issue. But again, stems from a lot of the things you're talking about. Mike, before you go, is there anything you want to say before we close out? Any nugget, anything?
Adam, my wife is a former BBC producer, and she always warns me, when a journalist says, "Is there anything else on your mind you'd like to discuss?" Just walk away.
All right. Now, don't walk too fast, Mike, because you were great. Folks, Mike Gonzalez joined me. His book is NextGen Marxism. It just came out. What it is and how to combat it. He wrote it with Catherine Cornell Gorka. Definitely pick it up. I want progressives to read this. Some of you don't even realize what you believe and where it comes from. Others of you should be disavowed or disabused of it. And the rest of you should just read it. But, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on. Part of what we do here is talk to people we don't have to agree with on everything, although you and I certainly found plenty of common ground. Sure. Where can people find you on Twitter or social, or where can people?
It's at Gonzalez. That's Gonzalez in Latin.
Yeah.
GUNDISALVUS.
Okay.
Just to look for Mike Gonzalez on Twitter. But find my book on Amazon. Buy it.
Yep.
It's selling well.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. Mike, as always, thank you for a healthy exchange of ideas. May the conservative future be Trump free.
Adam, I'm not going to agree with that, but I enjoyed the hour that we spent enormously.
Me too. All right. Don't walk away. Come back. All right, folks. Thank you as always. Thanks, Mike. Stay dirty, stay moderate, and stay safe.